Don't you just love it when you're talking to the camera and then you look up and you notice that it's not recording? That's just happened. That's just what happened to me. So for the third time, hi guys, it's Rebecca. Thank you so much for joining me for today's video. Today's video is my September reading wrap up. These are the books that I read in the month of September. I read 8 books. I liked most of them, and in no particular order, I'm just gonna start with the book that's on top of my stack. And that was the fastest intro because I've done it 3 times. So the first book that I'm going to talk about is Get a Life, Chloe Brown by Talia Hibbert. Unfortunately, this was not my cup of tea. I kind of lately have been, in the minority in regards to popular books and me not liking them. The last month, I think, was Legends and Lattes that I didn't care for, and now Get a Life, Chloe Brown. This book was just... it says here, extraordinary, full of love, generosity, kindness, and sharp humor. We didn't read the same book. Whoever wrote that and me didn't read the same book. I was really enjoying it at the beginning, but I just didn't enjoy the romantic scenes again. I'm not a prude. I'm not, it just felt very unnecessarily graphic, descriptive. I don't know, like I was like uncomfortable even at some points, and it's just, I mean, I've read other spicy books before. It's just this book, I didn't really like it. I don't know, vulgar maybe is the word that I would use it to describe this. I just felt like it was too much, and it was just not for me. I do have the second book, so I'm gonna give it a try. If I don't like it, then I'm not going to continue on with the series. And unfortunately, I have another book from Talia Hibbert, but it's a YA book, so I feel like it would be a little bit more, or I would hope it would be a little bit more tamed than this one. So yeah, unfortunately, this book, if you guys didn't know, we follow Talia, not Talia, Chloe, who has MS, if I'm not mistaken. But she makes a list of all these things that she wants to do, and she meets a guy that's going to help her. And of course, feelings start to develop, and we go from there. So it was just, like I said, it had a good, I gave it 3 stars. It had a good beginning for me, but it's just when it got to that romantic portion of it, I didn't care for it. Then the last book that I read this month is actually this next book, The 4 Winds by Kristen Hanna. This is her latest book. I don't think she has released anything after this book, but she wrote The Nightingale, The Great Alone, Firefly Lane. Those are the most famous books I think that she's written. If you haven't seen the Firefly Lane, is a series on Netflix. But in this book, we follow like 2 points of views. We follow this lady named Elsa during the Great Depression. Well, it starts in the 1920s, and we follow her. Well, it says here, so I guess it's not a spoiler, but she ends up getting pregnant by this guy who she's only been with a couple of times. They're not really in love. They really don't even know each other. They just kind of like each other and slept together a couple of times. She ends up being pregnant, and because of the time, she's already 25, and being single, at 25 back then was like, oh my gosh, you're an old maid. And the fact that now she was pregnant, they're like, no one's ever gonna marry you, might as well marry the baby's daddy. And he didn't care, like he had plans to go to college. He ends up staying here, and it's just this couple that I guess resents each other so much for having to get married. It's a very loveless relationship, I guess. And then you add in the factor of the Great Depression coming, and they were already poor, and it's just a hard story to read. I didn't cry with this book like I did with the last 2, but it was still really, really good. I gave it 4 stars. I really enjoyed it. It's kind of a long book, but I read it super, super fast. I stayed up like almost all night. I stayed up to I started it one evening, on Saturday evening, and then I went to sleep at 1 in the morning, and then I finished it on Sunday. Like I flew through it really, really fast. I tend to do that with Kristen Hanna books. I don't know, they're just easy to read. They're very engaging. Not my favorite from hers. Not as good as the other ones that I mentioned, but still a really good read. Then I read a series, the Ash Princess series. Is that what this is called? By Laura Sebastian. We have book 1, Ash Princess, book 2, Ember Queen, and book 3, Lady Smoke. So I'm gonna hold just the first book because it's hard to hold 3 books up at once. But in this book we follow, it's a young adult fantasy series in which we follow our main character, Theodosia. We call her Theo for short. And the Kremlin, is that what it's called? No, not the Kremlin. The Kaiser has taken over the kingdom and has killed her mother, the queen, and so she is named Ash Princess because like they have like burned her mother. And it's kind of like a derogatory term to call her the Ash Princess. Instead of killing her as well as her mother, he decides to keep her prisoner because they were very beloved by the kingdom, and so he decides to keep her prisoner in order to manipulate the kingdom into doing what he wants, because if they don't, he'll hurt the princess. So that's why she's kind of like, she's kind of a pawn in his little game. And we follow the classic trope of the reluctant person who's the reluctant claim to the throne that decides to finally just fight for what's their right, their birthright. And we follow having a battle, love triangle. It was a pretty generic, full of tropes fantasy series. I gave it 3 stars as a whole. It's not a series that I would go back and read or recommend. This is probably one of the series that I would donate towards the end of the year. Next, I read All My Rage by Sabaa Tahir. Sabaa Tahir, as you guys know, wrote the An Ember in the Ashes series, which is an amazing fantasy series. Not high fantasy, but it is a fantasy series. But in this book, this is a standalone book, and we follow, it's a dual point of view story from our main characters, Sal and Noor, who are teenagers. They were friends that kind of drifted apart, that come back together due to certain circumstances that happen. We follow their struggles they're both from Pakistani descent. Something happens in Sal's life that makes the friendship kind of rekindle the friendship with Noor. They both deal with being, poor, deal with racism. They deal with just the struggles that happen with being a minority and underage and kind of like alone in the world. It's a very heavy subject. I'm doing a terrible way I'm describing it terribly, but I just don't know what to say or how to say it not to spoil anything, because it is a dual point of view, and I don't want to give out what happens that makes them come together. Would I say it's a love story? I would say it's maybe it's even a survival story, coming of age. I'm not sure, but this is a really, really good book. It really gets into the story right away. And we also have kind of, I think, from the past and the beginning. Yes. We follow Sal's mom in Pakistan in the past, and then in the present we follow Sal and Noor. So it's a really, really good book. I give it 4 stars if I'm not mistaken. I really enjoyed it, and I do recommend it. Then I also read a Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires by Grady Hendrix. I really enjoyed this book. I wasn't expecting to like it. For some reason, I thought he's the one who wrote My Chainsaw Is a Massacre or something like that. But no, that wasn't him, which I didn't like that book. But this book was a lot darker than I thought it would be. So it took me by surprise. Maybe that's why I enjoyed it, because I had certain expectations and it was completely different. In this book, we follow this book club that's set in the South. Ladies that, they're kind of bored with the regular book club and people seemingly trying to be really like intellectual and and they don't really care for the books that are being picked, and they want something that truly interests them. So they decide to have a book club with true crime books. And so, you know, trying to be friendly, they invite the new neighbor into their book club, and he may or may not be a vampire, and things start getting dicey after he gets involved in the book club in regards to the true crime books that they are reading. So really enjoyed it. Like I said, I didn't expect it to get as dark as it did towards the end, and the way that there's a huge like time jump, maybe about 2/3 of the book in, and I was expecting the book to finish the way the second act finished, and I was like, there's a whole final act, like what's gonna happen? So that whole third last act was just a complete surprise for me. Really enjoyed it, and I highly recommend, especially for October. If you like reading spooky books around October time, this is a good one. And then last but not least, I read Daisy Darker by Alice Feeney. I love Alice Feeney. I think she writes really great like thrillers, suspenseful / thriller books. And in this book, I enjoyed myself the whole time I was reading this book. This book, we follow our titular character, Daisy Darker, and although the Darker family, they all get together for this kind of like family reunion at the grandmother's house. She lives in this kind of land, I don't know what it's called, but like it's this place where the house it's not on an island, but if the tide rises, like there's no in and out. You have to wait till the tide lows, like comes down again, or you need a boat to get you to the house. So it's not really an island, because it just depends on the tide. If there's a word for that, let me know. But anyway, her house is in that kind of land. So she invites everybody because she believes that she's going to die on October 31st. This is another like October book that you could read if you want to, but you know, her psychic told her that she's gonna die on October 31st, so she would like one last reunion with her family. So she invites everybody there, and they're having these kind of like morbid conversations at dinner about if they died, like how would they like to go, or if they were gonna kill someone, how they would do it. And sure enough, you know, the morning of October 31st, the grandma is dead. And so it's kind of like a whodunit. Oh, well, she's dead. And then every X amount of time, one person dies. One of the family members start dying. So it's kind of like a whodunit type, and then there were none type book. If you guys have read Agatha Christie's and then there were none, you guys know that every so often, like all the characters start dying, and you're like, well, who did it? And so that's what happens in this book. So really enjoyed it. I had a nice time. Oh, I just saw the cover. Now it makes sense. Look, there's a house, and then you see the land, and then the tide coming in. Now it makes a lot of sense. See what happens when you pay attention? Anyway, really enjoyed it. I feel like with all Alice Feeney books, like the payoff at the end is not as good as like, at least for me, when I found out who the killer was, I was surprised, but when they gave the reasoning of why they were doing it, I was like, really? That's why you're doing it? And I find that most of Alice Feeney's characters, when they reveal the motive, it's always very like anticlimactic. So that's why it keeps me from giving any Alice Feeney's books any 5 stars, because I haven't had that one book where I'm like, dang, that was a good twist. You know, I always feel like let down when the motive or the twist is revealed. But still, it's a good read. I was highly entertained every time I was reading it, and 4 stars is not bad. I really enjoyed it. So unfortunately, you guys, I forgot to read a nonfiction book. If you guys have been with me, I am trying to read one nonfiction book every month for 2023, and I didn't read one last month in August, because in July I read 2, and I was like, well, in August I won't read one, and then I'll be all caught up. But then in September, since I didn't read one in August, I kind of forgot to read one in September. So for October, my goal is to read 2 nonfiction books and hopefully get caught up so I can have my 12 finished by the end of the year. So that's all I have for my reading wrap up, you guys, for September. I hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye.